Well, welcome to the third round in the semifinals of the bowling for luggage tourney. Our first team tonight will be, I think it's Oral Roberts and Hulk Hogan will be. Now that I've said that, I think I'll leave. Which would be the worst to be locked up with? That just about covers it accidentally. Maybe throw in an IRS man and a little more regarding acts and facts that we didn't get to. Is ponder another possible way to look at the picture of what operational purposes the intellect may be serving. And if you will try and picture with us now. That's saying picture with us. Or for you children, try and imagine. But try and picture this. Remember, as a possible operational purpose of the intellect is just before that ever important first word was ever spoken. And I will have to admit, as much as I hate to do it, that we must assume this has a certain allegorical significance, since all the religions and many people like to hear the idea that in some way the whole universe, well, even the scientists, the good old atheists, they call it the Big Bang. They don't say the Big Silence. So even if you don't go for the thing that Jehovah or somebody went, whatever he went, I don't speak Jehovian. I mean, that's all I could do to get through Spanish 101. But whatever it was he said, even if you don't believe that, at least even the scientists, they go, bang! So there is an importance. And we've also, those of you of memory, know we've been through a sort of our own version. But in a sense, there is no secondary world. In a sense, there is no mortal creation, even if you're not religious, until the first word is spoken. That is, until the intellect is cranked up, till that thing is fired and begins to run. And you know one way that it begins to run. With an automobile engine, you smell smoke. When this fires up, it is as though, which I would suggest to you, is the background radiation of the descriptions that come out in the city of there was really nothing going on, or there was no, the good Old Testament version, that the gods had already created all the planets and everything, but not man, not life. And that did not happen until the Word, and there are versions all over the planet. I was suggesting, as we have covered in the past, that is, the background of it is the reality of the energy that fires the intellect. That man, assuming that he was wandering around here before he could talk, let's just assume that, for those of you that like caveman comic books. But it took the first word, that there was no man, the thinking animal, until there was man, the speaking animal. They are simultaneous. They are synonymous in operation. So, back to where we were, I just wanted to stress that is what I meant by the all-important first word, because you can take that across a wide spectrum religiously, and you don't have to be religious, of course, but to see that it does signify, it is a mythological reflection, an urging that life has put through man in some way to push, in religions all over the world, all kinds of legends, that the gods in some way did not really get things going. That humanity was not really thrown down on the fast track and operating until he could talk. That anything before that was less than being truly human, which is a fair description. Thank you. But then, of course, the religions, they attribute it to a God, that God had to say, send down a spark, or either send down something like Michelangelo's reflection and go. But the spark always had to do with the Word. The intellect began to talk. As I said, from a cruder version, they would say the gods spoke and said, boom, bang, let there be life. Talk it up, begin to yammer. But it was only then, in a sense, that man, with a little m, began to exist. Anything before that would have been less than secondary man. That this does not operate until that all-important first word is spoken. Now back to what I was going to suggest, to consider another way to look at the kinds of normally unanalyzed possible uses, operational uses of the intellect, is picture right now, just before that all-important first word, which this will not work, temporally speaking, for the three-dimensional mind, but consider just right before, almost so close that it was almost simultaneous, but not quite. That just before that, the mind, the intellect, already itself was laying out the first blank page. And then, just like that, as soon as the first word, what did it do? I'll tell you. It then composed sentences of facts. I'll admit, as always, this life just sets them up. They are just sitting ducks. They are wooden facsimiles of milk bottles, but in this case, they're not gaffed. That is, for those of you that wasted your younger years out at carnivals trying to impress some young girl when your face was breaking out, and the guy said, "A dime, knock over those 3 wooden bottles down there with a baseball, and you win a teddy bear." You know, Hercules couldn't do it, in case you never figured it out. It's what's known as gaffed. Look it up sometime. Or see if you don't have a knuckle that was a swindler. He'll know what it was. I'm saying, when life sets up the examples, and you can see in a more subversive way, they are sitting ducks, and they will fall. And so here it is. It is such a, quote, aren't they begging for it, metaphor, parable, allegory, that the mind, and I don't mean in some old philosophical way of the blank slate that the British imperialists and other people dreamed of, that the way the intellect was. It's not really that. It's just this. Consider just before, like these kinds of pre-echoes on good old analog records and tapes, that just before the first bar of the song, the first note or so, if you listen, it's already bled over on the other side of the groove in the record, an analog record, and you can hear what's about to happen. They call it a pre-echo. And don't write me and complain about oxymorons. They did that in the city without my help. But it was almost, if you're following, it was almost just before this all-important first word, just before the intellect was actually cranked up. It was like it heard a pre-echo, and just a split second before, it knew it had to get to work. It pictured, all right, blank page, I'm ready. And then like that. And then like that, just afterwards, it immediately had to get to work. It had the blank page so that the first word could be spoken, because if it couldn't be spoken, if there wasn't a blank page, it couldn't be spoken. I know I'm mixing the metaphors, but it wouldn't have been on the blank page. Blank audio page, auditory page then. But as soon as the first word was spoken and the intellect was going, it immediately had to go to work. It's not like showing up and you have a union position to where even you're there on time and punch in, and you can, I think they call it in the physicists union, lollygag about for 10 or 15 minutes before you actually have to go to work. It immediately, all of this happening almost simultaneously, except that for those of you really getting good is the only reason I'm protecting your little insight. It couldn't happen simultaneously from a three-dimensional view, but it did. That just before it fired up, it was aware of the fact, blank page, and then it fired up, and then it, right after that, had to go to work, and what did it do? It had to compose sentences of facts immediately. Do note, there is no question regarding, in the sentences of facts, quote, there is no question as to it being good facts, slanderous facts, evil facts, faulty facts, just facts. And that was a long time before Dragnet. Just the facts. It doesn't matter. There is no qualification as to what kind of facts. Wait a minute, are those important facts? Of course, it really covers, it already did. Are those true facts or false facts? It has nothing to do with it. Nothing. It was simply that the intellect, I'm suggesting, had to produce immediately as soon as the blank page was there. Or it would have been like finally coming out to take those other crude, tangible ideas of evolution. It'd be like, allegorically speaking, our forefathers and foremothers and uncles coming out of the water and first breathing. That would be like the intellect getting cranked up, and immediately after that, it had to compose sentences of facts. It would have been the same as, I started to say fishes or lizards, but I'm afraid some of you might take it personally. But they came out, and they immediately, as soon as they came out of the water, they had to compose sentences of facts. That is, as soon as they came out of the water, they had to go, you understand, and breathe. You cannot wait around. You didn't stop and think, that is your forefathers. They didn't go, what in the hell is that? It's oxygen. It's pure. Where's the mix? Where is the H2O mix? Same way with sentences of facts. The intellect had no interest. That is not the need of the genetic line of succession or evolution. If we go, well, now we got the intellect cranked up. We got to put it in gear and drive off. We got to keep the engine running. We got to do something. Got to have sentences of facts, ideas, but sentences of facts. There was no, and we have left a long time ago, 2 or 3 minutes ago, any idea, any world of ordinary intellect or religion or evolution or science. It is now that the energy is flowing, and it's up to this point in humanity. And it is no question, you ought to be able to see this without me having to do my own imitation of Hulk Hogan, Oral Roberts. I always confuse them. Which makes it interesting where some of our money goes to support religious causes. Anybody that fell into that trap, though, when you die, where are you going to go? That big ring in the sky? There is no question involved. None once this is lined up, once this is cranked up and online. There's no question about, well, wait a minute. I can sort of see that it's up to me. This thing is now going. You can't stop it. I mean, if you could, it's suicide. So you can't stop it. Humanity cannot stop it. Now the energy, the electrical energy has reached this point and it's going. It's got to think. It's got to deal now in sentences. Not the blank page and not just the word. The reason I keep saying sentences for a minute, trust me, instead of just facts. So I'm just trying to get you to see a certain kind of, at least at the three-dimensional level, a kind of symbolic progression. That is, at first is the word, whatever it was, whatever religion or whatever idea, bang! So you got it going. So after that, it can't be one word anymore. That's already been done. You can only dance on your own grave once. So it's already cranked up. Then it has to be not a word, but now sentences of facts. But there is nothing involved with the physical, the literal movement of energy through the human nervous system that has anything to do at that level, which is not city level, I'll grant you, not the ordinary thinking level, but it has nothing to do with whether what I'm thinking is true, false, felonious, disreputable, chocolate, wet, vanilla, north, east, no condition whatsoever. We're talking about facts. Yes, but what? No. Well, I mean, are we? No. It is, and I hate to be so insulting to moot operations to call them moot or moot questions, but it is. There is no question whatsoever as to the nature, the quality, the quantity, the size, the dimension of the facts, of the sentences. They simply have to be there. Now, from a certain kind of shifted but still complex view, I would suggest to you that this is a fair description. We could say that this is where man, the thinker, stands today. That man is still in the position here. That man is still in the position that he has got to continue to churn out facts, sentences of facts, with no, I repeat again for a second, with no qualifiers whatsoever. It's got nothing to do with it ultimately as to what kind of facts, because some facts are proven wrong later. I know. Some facts are just, or sentences of facts as you call them, are just prima facie erroneous. I know. The intellect at that level has got to continue to just simply turn out facts on the basis of being able to fatten up, to being able to flesh out, to civilize, to make secondarily acceptable acts. Acts cannot stand alone. They cannot stand alone in a secondary world. If they were standing alone, you would not be talking about a secondary world. You'd be talking about a primary world. You'd be talking about a world where there are no sentences. You'd be talking about a world where there is no intellect going on. Part of the intellect's job, once it begins to deal in sentences of facts, or now can I just say facts, that you, for whatever possible value it had of me trying to get you to consider that kind of progression that seems to have occurred in the history of man, that is, from the gods or something, the Big Bang, of it being one word, but then it had to expand. That one word, as you know, will not make a language. One word does not even exist until you get the second word to compare it with. You know, there is no such thing as vanilla ice cream. Not alone. There is no such thing as wet. There is the reality of it, but there is no such thing as wet until there's a second word, non-wet. So after the one word was immediately a second word. I just jumped it for you and went into sentences. So now the intellect is operating, when I'm saying facts now, I'm saying as opposed to whatever the one word that got it going. It is now a series. It is now a process, not a thing. It is not that the one word, which the crude level it comes out to people's religious conception, or it has been in the past, that the one word in some way was magic. Many people on this planet still believe that. That either the one word of their religion or the one word that they don't know, that there is a one word somewhere that if you knew the word, phew, boy, you'd have it made. You could lose weight, skip your income taxes, be able to pick up a channel that showed professional wrestling 24 hours a day with no commercials. The one word was simply like turning the switch. The one word was like it reaching finally the cerebral cortex, and it cranked up. But after that, immediately, one word won't do it. There's no magic one word. We can allegorically say, yeah, there was. But as soon as it was done, like everything else, it's moot. Because in one word, you would have no conception of one word. Your intellect would not operate with one word. I don't care how secret or how common. It doesn't matter what the word was. You got to have two words, or you can't think. You got to have two words. You've got to have the polarized flow of energy, just like AC current, or even DC, but you've got to have polarized energy to run anything at the three-dimensional level, including what? Your eyebrows. No, your brain, your intellect. So, it's from the one word into sentences of words. That is, facts. That's where we were. The facts serve a specific, tangible purpose. I didn't mean to give anybody the blues that may be trying to shed a few pounds, but in a quite real sense, facts fatten up, they flesh out the kinds of, imagine the acts being our pre-verbal progenitors. As old simple history would have it. The poor old clods out there mucking about before they could talk, cavemen. I assume that you would, well, let's just play along. You don't have, I won't assume, I'm just making it up, and you can make it up too, but what the hell. Those people, before they could talk, out there wandering around, naked, cold and all that, I would seriously doubt that there were any of them overweight. You're starving, they're wandering around, nowhere to stay. All right. What's one of the first things? What would be one of the first things? Well, follow this. It's not just a joke. If now you could get in to some sort of area that I keep suggesting, like beyond the 3rd and 4th dimension, that in some way you could get where things are turning around corners. That is, you could look down and see what was going on at one dimension, like the 3rd dimension, planet Earth, but at the same time see more manifold, higher reflections of it. Trust me. That you could see one thing going on, and you could see like the hand making the shadow puppets that look like your forefathers out there wandering around in the caves. If you saw that, you could see one way to gauge if you were being able to be aware of a greater dimension, and then with one eye, you're also every now and then looking down and watching what was going on planet Earth. And for a while you saw, and it's all these people that sort of resemble humans. They're not talking, they're grunting, they don't have TV. Pre-man the thinker, pre-verbal man. One way, if you didn't keep up, what if your hearing aid went out and you're looking down? I would suggest to you one way that you would have some suspicion that they were getting civilized, that they were becoming verbal, was that you'd look down, whatever years, eons had been, you'd look down, you go, ah, and now they were a little heavier, may I suggest. Now some of you are so far away that you weren't listening in. That would give you, if you're trying to keep up, it might make you want to turn up your hearing aid or lean over, because if you already knew how things operate, that's why I said that you had some awareness of other dimensions, you would know they're beginning to talk because they're getting, as they say in the South, they're getting fleshy. They do not look like, people living in the, I don't want to pick on anybody in Appalachia. They're fleshing out. They are getting more civilized. They're not out 24 hours a day having to scramble for food, always on the verge of starvation, because once you begin to talk, and I'm not going to stop them, you ask yourself, you mean talking makes people fat? No. I mean, there's only so much we can cover, and we can't even cover that much, so give me a break. But I am telling you, it would be, if you knew what you were doing, if you looked down, it'd been a while, and you looked down, and instead of our progenitors, all these stringy looking, let's say they're still ugly and naked, but now they look a little healthier, like they might make it through the night. I'm getting, a little. You would know. Those bastards are talking, I'll bet you money. Now, consider what I said, that I did not mean, as always, I did not mean it limited to physical, somatic, tangible aspects. But now, not just physically, it would be true physically, but not just physically, it would be now a fact that once man, the thinker, is fully blown, or at least he can drive off the lot. He's driving out all right for the time. Once that happens, he is not only getting to be a fleshy boy himself, but this is beginning to flesh out. It's no longer one word, of course. It's no longer just 2 or 3 words. It's a whole lot of words. His intellect now begins to fatten up acts. It begins to flesh them out, just instead of non-verbally going out and eat something, swallow it, maybe make a rude noise. Now he'll turn around and maybe make a rude noise, and somebody says, "Boy, is that a rude noise?" He says, "Yes, but have you ever eaten one of those vegetables there?" "No, I haven't." "Are they good?" "I don't know. I can't decide. My food processors in the pawn shop, so I'm not sure I'm cooking them correctly." In other words, they begin to talk about primary things, as if there was something else to talk about. But you understand, they are now beginning to fatten up experience. They no longer now just eat. They do what? Make rude noises? No. They talk about eating. They no longer just get down. They at least the men used to, get together later in the locker room and say, "How was she?" Facts. The intellect begins to flesh out. It begins to, in fact, civilize. Or I'll give you a combination subclause. It begins to civilize, make secondarily acceptable raw acts. The intellect. Well, I'll give you, if you'd like it, I'll give you our 6D or near 5D theorem for the night regarding this, is that the intellect must continually turn out facts to keep acts up to date. Because that's exactly, if you understand that, that's exactly what I've been having to babble about for the last 5 minutes to say. I'm just trying to give you several ways to look. That the intellect is in part now charged with, once it speaks in sentences of facts, is to fatten up the primary, nonverbal, older, more basic area of acts. It's to fatten it up, to flesh it out, to give it some more dimension, to civilize, comma, make secondarily acceptable raw acts. And so the wrap-up was, what I was sort of giving you as a theorem, was that say that the intellect must continually turn out facts to keep acts up to date. Because in the 3D world, that is always a fair operational description, as long as you know it means more than literal, or literally what it says. But to keep things up to date means to keep things operationally synonymous, operationally collateral with what seems to be driving them, and or vice versa. And so fatten it up, make acts civilized, make them secondarily acceptable, means keep them up to date. And up to date is whatever the hell's going on. And whatever the hell's going on, please note, is no longer the world of acts. Because people stumble around, it happens, and it's almost an unnoticed and irrelevant anomaly now, but to stumble across something that seems to be just an act, and the first thing you want to do is write a book. No. Well, you do, but that's after you go, what in the hell happened? Am I still sane? I had a mystical experience. I was visited by somebody from another planet. If there is not a fact to flesh up, to sort of fatten up whatever happened to you, well, I guess you got it. But if something happened, weird, spooky, whatever, that was just an act, just think about it. And if something happened, as far as you know, I don't encourage any city-level insanity. But if we can by that open to suggestion, I don't know what you're doing here anyway, right? I don't give a real example, but this happens to people in life that just suddenly you're walking down the street and you turn around the corner and something happens that's, how about spooky, weird? No. We'll assume it doesn't happen to you anymore. Don't tell me if it does. But surely all of you have been through something like this. And the best you can do is pull your little neurons together right quick and you think, I'm sane. I'm not, didn't take that much dope back in the 60s. It's not a flashback. I'm all right. But what in the hell was that? And what it was an act that had no fact to flesh it out right then. And it's like, boy, is that weird. And of course, then later is how it comes about. I might suggest to you that when people have these gastronomical anomalies that then, of course, reflect themselves in what they think happens sensually to them, and they don't have a fact for it, then later you've got several choices. Well, you can forget it. It's your mind just. You can write a mystical book. You can start a religion. But that's about it. Because after the fact, you got to go, boy, what in the hell was that? And since there was no collateral fact available at the time, at least to you, that it was just a fact. An act happened, and there was no parallel, accompanying, supportive fact. No matter how weird, it was just, you didn't know what happened. Then if you're not going to forget it, which is the easiest way, that's the way life finds most efficient, is you just turn your head. Is when I do that little shtick sometimes, is when things happen to people or they think they hear something weird or see something weird, you go, well, I got to, that thing, like I got to go. You just turn your head and it's like it's all over. It was just a short circuit. It was like a gremlin, a transient, what is it, electrical anomaly in your stereo or the radio. And you're afraid your brand new tuner it's got a short, but you listen, it sounds all right now. Who wants, why borrow trouble? It's brand new. Or at least it's never getting in trouble, and it was just for a second you were just listening along and da-da-da-da-da, and went zzz. And you don't think that Haydn wrote that kind of stuff. He had a sense of humor, but... And so you don't hear anything else, and you just like, hey, well enough alone. That's the most common. But the other way is, if that does not happen, for whatever reason, and you're part of an act for which there is, as far as you are wired up, that there is no supporting fact, and you do not forget it, that's when many strange and wondrous things happen in human life. They're all around you. Churches. That's the most common. Religions. The other one being, I can't remember the Dewey Decimal section, but it's right there in the beginning of all libraries, where all the books on, I was visited by a flying saucer. Next to it, no he wasn't, I was, is the next book. And then the third one is by the first guy that says, yeah, but I got visited twice. What else? I'm not going to stay here. It's not of any great importance. Well, it shouldn't be to you people individually or personally, but the world is full of it. Religion is the most common, but if that seems too broad a brushstroke for you, down to the common of, or the individual levels of people, it might be easier for you to, at the old level, to identify as being a little on the unbalanced side. If somebody says, yes, I am spoken to constantly by not only a dead American Indian, but a dead American Indian who was originally from Pluto, which I was trying to up the stakes a little. Let's say for whatever reason that you're so, for whatever reason, you don't really buy into that. Then it's easier for you to say, well, that is absolute insanity. That's a word. That's a fact. But there is something else involved. Continually throughout, and you've experienced some of it, that you have had acts, that you've been a part of an act. You've been in an act, and there was no accompanying fact. And you just normally, it just goes away. You forget it, like a kind of transient piece of static in your stereo. But those who do not, life needs it here and there. And it may sound like insanity for me to say the dead American Indian from Pluto, but I might suggest to you that that is not that far removed from the foundations of all the world's major religions. Not that I don't mean that there's not more involved on an institutional basis for the needs of life, but it's the basis of having acts occur that there were no facts to support it, to explain it. And I mean explain in the widest sense. There was no fact that seemed to be going along, no Hansel fact going along to hold Gretel's surprising act hand. That you're suddenly confronted, walked around the corner of the trail there, and suddenly, and you've never seen her, you didn't know what it meant, there was, you just have to trust me now. Of course, I'm having to stretch the use of three-dimensional intellect. There was Gretel. And you've never seen Gretel, you don't know what it is. That is an act of which you have no accompanying fact. The accompanying fact would be, when I said supporting, in case you think I've lost you already, would be if you looked around and went, oh, and there was Hansel holding her little hand and then walking along. Then it's all right. You understand? And it doesn't matter that made any sense. It wouldn't matter whether Hansel seemed to have any exemplary significance to Gretel. Is back to what I tried to get you to consider when we started earlier. Insofar as the facts being reasonable, sentences of facts, or being logical, or true or false, that's not the point. As long as there was any Hansel holding Gretel's hand, that is, as long as there was any sort of fact to go along with this surprising act, because if there's any fact that went along with it, it's no longer a complete surprise. It is no longer a true anomaly. You understand? But if it is an absolute anomaly, of course I wouldn't even read the word anomaly for you, it's just that. And that leads life to do many strange and wondrous things, oftentimes passing as supernatural and very, very serious, when what it was something happened to somebody and they didn't know what the hell it was. And now you're having to pay 10% of your gross income to some church or worry about, boy, when I die, is there any chance I'm actually going to Oklahoma City and have to hang around Oral Roberts the rest of my life? Don't any of his kinfolk write me. Write to Hulk Hogan if you... Note something else about the need, the possible significance, operational use of the intellect producing sentences of facts, is that in this necessary city process, the production of just facts is just that. It's just facts, and it's not new, independent thinking. That is, the needs of life running through anybody, through ordinary humanity, of the continual production of facts, scientific, philosophical, I know they're called theories and etc., religious, all of that still qualifies as, quote, just facts. Because that is what is needed. That is the basic neural nutrition that the intellect needs. It's just facts. It's got nothing to do. We might as well take another allegory. Not to attack anybody, but it's like primarily you would eat to stay alive. You would eat whatever. And then on secondary level, not right or wrong, but on the secondary level is where you're concerned over, wait a minute, I'm not sure I want to eat that. That's pretty passé. I know what that is. That's from some of last year's Nouveau Nebraska cuisine. That is so gauche that it makes me want to eat with my left hand when I'm right-handed. See, that would be, if it was actually had a true radical significance, that would be a concern over whether the facts are true or not. And see, that's not it. It can apparently be, at the city level, it can apparently be new facts, that is, new thinking, because it constantly is operationally at the city level that. That is progress. But what I want you to see is in one person's lifetime, what we've been calling a kind of neural revolution, that has no significance, because at that level it is not really new information. It is not new individual usable information. It's just facts. Now they're new, let's assume. I'm not questioning that. At city level they say, by God, this is a new fact. We have discovered yet another element. We have invented another element. We put together, we have now discovered a new fact, scientifically. And the whole scientific community in that area goes, yes, that's true, there's no doubt. I'm not debating that. But it is still just facts. It is not any form of new, independent thinking. It can't be. How about a seditious sidebar? I've been waiting for an opportune moment to do it, and there are none. Moments. Comparably speaking, acts do not seem as polarized as facts. For an example, just ordinary men can pretty well accept the act of their dying, but they cannot so much do so regarding the facts of their unavoidable, their ultimate demise. Even with a cheap off-the-rack gesture, I should just leave it there. Because any example less than that should be less of an example. Maybe not enough people's been around. That should strike you somewhere in your nervous system, though. Somebody just absolutely dying. Somebody's just been shot. Somebody in a wreck that's still conscious. They can accept the act. That should strike you anyway, whether you've literally been in the position. But what is it that men cannot, comparably speaking, so much accept? Not the act of dying, the facts regarding their upcoming demise. Whether it's 2 hours from now, the doctor says you got 6 months to live, or whether you just hit 40 and your hormones begin to kind of get weird, and you begin to think, Jesus, Mother of God, my life is half over and I haven't done anything. And you get I think psychiatry calls it the extreme blue willies. Or something, I don't know, I'm behind in modern psychiatry. It's a different ball game with the intellect. To be actually confronted with death, that you're in a car wreck and you're just barely conscious, and maybe you even hear somebody over there talking. The medics say, well, we can pack this guy up and drive him in, but he ain't going to make it. And you can be aware, I'm dying. And people dying do not go into hysteria, by the way, if you don't know. They do not. They do not begin to scream, I'm dying. Not over the act of dying. They will begin to scream over what? The fact of dying. That they look all right, but they go in for a little checkup. I don't know, it's a small cough. And 30 minutes later, you hear this terrible scream and moaning and crying. And this 6'8", 300-pound man in there has gone to pieces because the doctor says, "Sir, I would say at best, you got subscriptions to magazines? You know, if I were you, I would not renew any. You know, at best, you've got 2 months to live." I'm going to say 2 months. I'm being charitable. I don't know how you made it in office. And a man will go to pieces. Now, as I said, I picked out what should be an easy shot. But this is true in life in lesser ways that you'd normally think. With all kinds of apparent disappointments. Not that death couldn't prove to be a disappointment, I guess. But I'm talking about in things this side of death, when the actual act comes to it. I don't guess I have to dwell on this, but it's like another thing. Well, most people dread the dentist. I mean, just thinking about it. But once you get there, assuming that you're not the world's one of the outstanding sissies, once you get there, it never kills you. And don't tell me, well, it hurts a little. Hell, being alive hurts and all that crap. But once you get there, you just do it. The act itself. Now, of course, do not, if you're going to get anything out of it, do not get hung up on examples of dentist or death, whichever is worse. But it is this, that comfortably speaking, what I start out there is something quite useful here to some people. Comfortably speaking, acts seem, when I say seem, I mean the experience. They seem less polarized. That is, less pro and con, good or bad. That's not the end of the sentence. Compared to facts. And I tried to give you a range there from death to dentist. Because let's say that you hear about, well, I'm going to die. You don't like it. And it's not only you, it also happens in the world of facts, your memory. The remembered facts of other people's deaths, your mother's death, somebody you used to know, somebody you loved. The facts of it. But acts themselves, comparably speaking, seem, I'm suggesting, less polarized, less good or bad, less right or wrong. Note, it's always somewhere in a kind of tri-divided line of the past, the present, and the future. As far as the present right here, where acts would happen, they seem less polarized. It's what I was trying to get you to see, that if you were right there, if you were dying now, something happened, you were in a car wreck, and you were just within seconds, or a couple of minutes of dying, and you were still a little conscious, enough to say, you look down and maybe your head's about to hang off, and you look at the guy and you say, "Am I dying?" And the fellow's overcome with honesty, and he says, "Bubba, I'm afraid you're done for." I am suggesting to you, you would not wet your pants and go into hysteria. In the same way that once you're in the chair, the dentist says, "Are you comfy?" Of course, all of this is like the three-dimensional description of before the first word. Because everything before the act, you can find to be an exception to this, because you can go, "Oh, no, I can't stand this." And he says, "Come on, you're a big boy. Oh, no, give me another shot." But once it starts, that is, once the presence of the act, comfortably speaking, acts are less polarized. That is, there is less of any sort of mortal, "Oh, I can't stand to die." You can't stand to think about dying. You can't stand the facts about dying. "Oh, I can't stand the dentist. Hell with dying. I don't mind that. I can't stand the dentist." But notice, no one says that during the act. And don't say, "Well, my mouth's full of cotton." People say, I can stand death, I can stand the dentist. I cannot stand to have my heart broken. I can't stand a love affair that goes awry because I've had so many women leave me. At the moment, though, at the moment of any act, I'm going to tell you again, I assume enough of you, I'm going ahead and say I assume because we're running out of tape. Comparably speaking, acts themselves, acts, speaking of acts and facts and separating the two arbitrarily for our nefarious purposes, acts are less polarized. There is less of a pro and con. It's almost, comparably speaking, non-existent compared to facts. And I tried to pick out, to most people, the worst example, the most extreme. But it is true. Men can stand. They can accept the act of dying. They do not embarrass themselves. If you're actually dying, you can go ahead and get it over with. But not the fact of dying. We're talking about something else now. The facts of knowing of your unavoidable, inescapable, perhaps even imminent demise, that's something else. Facts are polarized. They've got to be. I guess enough of you see that, but in the same way that there's got to be two words to be one word operational. There's got to be two words before you can speak. For there to be any facts, there can't be one fact. I don't care what it is. There's got to be two facts. Whatever that, if you had some real minuscule kind of religious wired up mind, you thought, well, all right, there could be one fact, and one fact would be, let's say, you'd say God. If you were more of a humanist, you could say the truth. It doesn't exist until there's another word, some kind of word. For there to be a God, for there to be truth, you've got to have at least truth and rutabagas. Yeah. Or, of course, I guess, if you want the obvious truth, and what's the other one? False, error. In the same way, there is no such thing as a fact. I don't care what. There is no supreme fact. There is no transcendental single fact. And if there is, it did not occur until there were two facts. And so now it's not the supreme fact. Now it can be the semi-supreme fact, or it can be the fact sharing with this second fact the supremacy of the verbal universe. But there is no such thing as one fact. It does not exist. If it was one fact, it is still at the level of an act. It has not been fattened up. It is there. I'm not saying it's not there, but it's not a fact. So all facts have got to be polarized. It's just that some seem worse than others, or some seem more subject to being upset, such as pain, death, loss, disappointment. But any fact is polarized. My suggestion was, since we're running out tonight of tape, there is a use for this. Ordinary people would have no use for it, because even if they saw it momentarily, they'd forget about it. Geez, I almost forgot about it. See? Well, if I got to suggest to where I kill off 2 more minutes before we start anything else, think about all of the things that bother one in life. Doesn't it sound better to talk about bother one than to bother you? All that might bother one, because one's always somewhere else. We're obviously not talking about anybody around here, because if we were, we'd go ahead and name them, right? Like, but to say one, we're obviously talking about people far away and long ago, maybe. But of all the things that bother one, if you would try and remember, the act, and whatever the facts are, they came from an act. They did not come anywhere except from an act. The act is less polarized. If we were back to the level, or if you could get to the level of the act that is behind, that is the threat, that is the reality, that is the underground stream feeding this fact, that is, and by fact, by now you know I mean in a wider sense, whatever it is you're thinking about, the dread of the dentist, or Jesus. I thought I had a bad love life and everybody left me, but now it's something worse. My first wife is threatening to come back. These are not acts. You're thinking about them. They're facts. But then consider, what is the act that makes this a reality to me? And if you can get back to that, the act itself, comfortably speaking, I suggest, is almost non-polarized. This is tied into the ordinary intellect's conception of a tri-divided sense of time, which was the next paragraph. But since I am due to be executed tomorrow, I guess we'll have to leave it, and you'll have to do it yourself. I can't remember. I'm either due to be executed or I've got the bowl tomorrow. I can't remember.